All right. Thank you all for listening or for joining our Community Transition Manual webinar, if you will. We're going to take you through the process of transitions and transfers as they relate to the individuals that we serve. So we're going to talk about the history of the transition manual. The manual does have authorities. We're going to cover in this training. So the history of the transition manual, it became effective on July 1st of 2016. This manual is designated to be a one-stop shop for everything that is transfer and transition related, which includes money follows the person, transition services, or community transition services, the notification process for individuals on the sex offender registry, step-by-step process for transferring files across different regions, and also Guideline 67. The next slide right here is our authorities. The transition manual has many authorities. This is the list. If you would like to read more about them, you can find the links to all of the authorities in the back of the transition manual. Throughout the presentation, we may use terms that you are not familiar with. So we included a glossary for your convenience. Again, the full list of glossary terms can be found in the manual as well. This is another page of the glossary. In the training, we're going to cover transfers for individuals living in natural homes, transfers of individuals residing in their homes using DD paid residential support, the administrative file process, transitions from HAB centers, home modifications, money follows the person, transitions for individuals on the sex offender status, and also community transition services.
So Titus, the first thing we're going to talk about today is transfers for individuals living in natural homes. So as you could probably tell us, no transfers are alike, are they?
That is exactly the truth, yes. They are all different.
So for natural homes, the transfer process is just a little different. Anytime an individual is moving within or out of his or her current region, the support coordinator will discuss with the individual or guardian choice to transfer or discharge from services. How many times have you moved in your life, Titus?
Well, we counted over lunch. I was speaking to Heike about this, and actually, since I was 18, I've moved 12 different times.
And a lot of stuff is involved in moving. I mean, you got to turn off your electric, reconnect your electric.
You got to get a U-Haul. You got to find a place. You got to put the deposit down.
You have to have a yard sale to get all this stuff.
Exactly.
You got to. Then when you move, you got to do all kinds of stuff like, get to know your neighbors, and there's just a lot. You got to find a new job.
Got to find a new job. You got to find your local grocery store.
So,
you name it.
When you think about the individuals we serve and their need for services to continue and not to continue, you can see there could be a lot that goes into a move.
For sure.
Communication is key to any transition and transfer. So if an individual or guardian chooses to remain in services, the sending support coordinator supervisor will send an encrypted email stating that the fact that of the following about the upcoming move. The receiving service coordinator supervisor, the transfer contact designee at the sending or receiving regional offices, and transfer contact designee after receiving TCM services. And then an electronic copy of the individual service plan and demographic page will be attached to that email. In addition, the individual and his or her family and or guardian, the following people may be involved in the natural home transfer. The sending and receiving support coordinator, the sending and receiving support coordinator supervisor, the sending and receiving community living coordinator, the sending and receiving TCM and or regional office transfer contact designee, and the sending and receiving provider staff. Other determined importance to ensuring the smooth transition should also be included in the transfer process. And again, remember to communicate with everybody. That's very key.
Yes.
Ensure that the communication occurs between TCM counties and between regional offices. So if someone's moving from Franklin County to Jefferson County, you need to communicate county to county, but if they're moving from the Rolla region to the Hannibal region, you need to communicate from region to region so that everyone is notified and included and aware of the upcoming transition. The receiving regional office transfer contact designee will inform the responsible regional office staff to open a second episode of care so that both parties are able to bill and have access to Seymour during this time of transfer. If the individual receives funded services, which will need to continue in the new location, the sending service coordinator or service coordinator supervisor will work directly with the receiving service coordinator at the receiving TCM agency or regional office to ensure that services are set up in advance of the move. An amendment or updated IST will be completed by the sending service coordinator prior to the individual's move. Approval for services will be authorized through the Sending Utilization Review Committee, and the sending service coordinator will share the new budget with the receiving service coordinator at the receiving TCM agency or regional office. So, Titus, is a transition meeting needed for natural home moves?
It's my rule of thumb that a transition meeting is always needed, no matter if they're coming from the natural home or from residential services.
So there's a lot of things that may be complex services that require a transition meeting be held. For example, self-directed services. You know, if someone's staff are not moving to the new county that they're moving to, that's something that's going to need to be set up and need to be planned for. If they have a need for employment, you know, that need to start their employment before they move. So that might be something that needs to be planned for. Services will need to begin after the individual moves. Those are things to think about before you decide whether to have a transition plan or not. Complex individual services needs shall require a transition meeting to ensure that all necessary supports and services are in place. The need for a transition meeting will be determined by sending and receiving TCM agencies prior to that move. And if a formal meeting is not needed, then the sending service coordinator can collaborate with the receiving team. It is the responsibility of the sending service coordinator to provide an up-to-date IST or amendment to the receiving service coordinator upon transfer. Once services are coordinated and authorized, the transfer may occur. After review of the transfer form, the receiving transfer contact designee or receiving TCM transfer contact will send an encrypted email to the sending TCM and regional office transfer contact and transfer contact designees within 3 business days, which will contain the following information.
Did you say 3 business days?
I said 3 business days.
Okay, just wanted to make sure, 3 business days.
So they're supposed to send the following information. Confirmation that they've received the transfer information, the effective date of transfer, and an address to mail records. Then the episode of care will end for the sending regional office 1 day prior to that date of transfer.
So we just learned about the natural home process. So our next transition will be for those individuals receiving paid services in the DD residential settings. So this is our new guideline, which you got an email blast on Wednesday, Guideline 67. Which basically states that the CLC at each regional office is going to complete ongoing monitoring of the transition process. So we have specific benchmarks that are required for all of the transitions. One of those benchmarks being placing the individual on the consumer referral database when they're seeking a new residential provider. When the CLC discovers that there's a situation with one or more of the transition process benchmarks, it's required, that has not been implemented as required by the transition manual, the CLC will then work with that support coordinator and or support coordinator supervisor to get that issue resolved. If attempts to resolve the issue regarding the transition process with the support coordinators are not effective, the CLC will then work with the TCM TAC and the regional office administration as appropriate to develop a plan to resolve that issue. On Wednesday, when you received that email blast that the Guideline 67 was published to the DMH website, inside that guideline is a link to all of the benchmarks that the CLCs will be monitoring. So when an individual is seeking residential placement They have to be entered onto the consumer referral database. The sending support coordinator shall electronically send the consumer referral profile and referral documents to the community living coordinator, who will place that individual on the database. Those documents include the ISP, the housemate compatibility tool, and any other relevant documents such as the behavior support plan, the health inventory, or any current amendments. The CLC will notify the SC as providers express interest. It is important that the SC assist in coordinating meet and greets with interested providers. The sending SC will arrange for the individual to visit the new support location and support persons. If this is not able to happen, we recommend that alternative methods such as pictures, videos, Facebook chatting, Skype, or any alternative methods are used.
So a telephone call?
A telephone call would be just fine for those old school people, yes. This is a screenshot of what the top half of the consumer profile looks like. As you can see, you have county of choice preference. So if someone wanted to live in Jackson County or in Greene County or St. Louis County, they have those options. On the consumer referral database, we have up to 7 county options that we can place people on. So if there are more, you can include those there. Or if they're wanting to pursue a statewide, you can just click the statewide little checkbox there. You have daily activities and services that the individual participates in, their daily living needs. You can show those on there as well as the medical support needs. And then the next slide that we will show you is just the consumer profile continued. There you go. Back one more.
Okay. That's okay. We're done.
That's all right. So this is just the consumer profile continued from the medical support needs, and then at the bottom is the altered levels of supervision that the individual may need. This is a fillable form, so you can just click on the boxes as needed, and they will X themselves as needed. So next slide is just the continuation of the consumer referral profile form. On here, intellectual skills, behavior issues. At the very bottom, rights restrictions. So if the individual has rights restrictions in their plan, you can put them here so that any provider that's interested in the individual can just read them right there. Also, next slide is just another continuation, a brief description of unique or special support needs. And if the individual uses a gait belt or has a wheelchair, a track system, a Hoyer lift, anything that's unique to that individual that a provider may need to know, you can type that right into that box. And then a summary of the current situation is just what's going on with the individual. Why are they, seeking new residential placement? Just a kind of a brief little history will work there. You're fine. This slide's the housemate compatibility tool. So things a potential housemate should know about you. Jennifer, if you were moving in with someone, what's something a potential housemate should know about you?
They should not talk to me before 10 o'clock, and then I need a cup of coffee before they start talking to me. And let me wake up on my own. Yes.
There you go.
Get me up. I'm not get angry.
And likewise, characteristics that Jennifer would like in a potential housemate would probably be the same. You need a cup, they need to like coffee. They should not be a morning person. So you just have the individual ask them these questions, and they can tell you. And then the support coordinator can get that filled out, send that to your CLC so they can get that uploaded onto the consumer referral database. When choosing a provider, this is in specific with the sex offender registry. The CLC will check the sex offender registry when it's determined that an individual seeking residential placement is on the registry. So for an adult over the age of 21, the CLC checks the Missouri Highway Patrol Sex Offender Registry. For a juvenile under the age of 21, we're still required to check the registry, but we also have to send a letter to the juvenile office in the individual's current county of residence to determine if they're a sex offender or not. So this is what is to be completed by the community living coordinator, information for determining their ISL rate, or using a rate allocation score for those group homes, if it's new placement or a move from a current placement, and then the bottom is when we check the sex offender registry, we have to put a date, and also a date that we send a letter to the juvenile office. When planning the transition, once a provider has been identified, the sending support coordinator will notify the following individuals by an encrypted email. Again, the sending and receiving support coordinators, their supervisors, the community living coordinators, TCM and or regional office transfer contacts, and provider staff. Again, as Jennifer stated, and we're going to state throughout this training, communication is very key when the transition process starts to occur. Others determine important to ensuring a smooth transition, maybe the area behavior analyst, maybe the regional office QERN,
Juvenile officer.
a juvenile office, children's division if they're in CD custody, and then the SC, again, she'll attach an electronic copy of the ISP and the demographic page in the email. So planning the transition continued. The sending SC and CLC will arrange and co-facilitate a transition meeting far enough in advance of the move to ensure that the transition is smooth. Again, remember, the regional office nurses and area behavior analysts, when that's appropriate. The sending SC will write a transition plan or ISP amendment, which will outline the plan move. During the planning process, the SC should be encouraged for more visits and meet and greets with potential housemates. Home and Community-Based Services, or HCBS, says that an individual should have choice in where he or she lives and with whom he or she lives with. If an individual is not able to visit the home or meet the housemates, again, please consider alternative methods, telephone call, Facebook, chatting, Skype, videos, pictures, or any other methods. The sending SC will utilize the checklist for community living moves. So once this is completed, it gets emailed to the entire planning team. The original shall go into the consumer's folder, the electronic folder. The sending regional office utilization review committee remains responsible for approving the plan and budget for the individual for that time. The sending SC will ensure that the proposed budget with the receiving regional office transfer, or they will share that budget with the receiving regional office transfer contacts. And then the sending SC will complete a health inventory prior to the move or within 10 days if it is an emergency. So this is the logging and billing. So this is specific to the support coordinators. The receiving regional office transfer contact designee will inform the responsible regional office when a second episode of care needs to be opened. This way, both TCM entities are able to bill and have access to see more during the time of transfer. This is not in the transition manual. However, we wanted to make sure that the TCM entities are aware of the process of how to bill or log for services when individuals are transitioning or transferring in and out of the region. For example, the sending SC may engage in activities specific to transferring the case to the receiving TCM entity, which is closing the case, while the receiving SC may be completing activities to become more familiar with the individual and the services that that individual would receive, which is opening the case. So this way, both the sending and the receiving SCs can both bill for those services.
That's located in the TCM manual, correct?
Yeah, I believe it is located in the TCM manual as far as the logging and billing. This is the checklist for community living moves. So on this page, again, this is a fillable form. So you can just type right on it the individual's name, their DMH number, where they're transitioning from, where they're transitioning to, which regional office they're coming from, which regional office they're going to, etc. You have initial transition meeting date, so if that's occurring today, you would put 11/3, and then the post-move follow-up. You can type that on there. Just some of the things that are on here. If the home is a new ISL prior to the move, has the support coordinator inspected the proposed new home using the ISL environmental site review form, and then in that action step completed, the SC would be able to say, yes, this has been done, and then in the comment section, it was completed on whatever date. Or you can put that date in the middle, and then any comments, this ISL passed inspection and is good to be moved into. And
the more comments, the better.
The more comments, the better, and the more interactive you'll be on the transition call. Again, this is something that the SC would fill out, and then they would go over that on the transition call. Go ahead. Can you minimize it? Perfect. The next slide is just a continuation of the checklist. All medical supports the individual needs are addressed in the ISP amendment. So again, the SC would put yes, that that's been completed, the date that he or she updated the ISP amendment, and maybe it doesn't need a comment, so then you wouldn't necessarily need to put anything in the comment section. And lastly, this is another continuation of the SC or the checklist. At the bottom, there's a spot for additional comments. So if you needed to put anything else that couldn't fit in the comment section, you could add that there. And then the SC signature is that line that's at the very bottom that is required. And then the SC would send that entire document out to the entire planning team. Or if they wanted to, they could send it to their CLC, and the CLC could send it out to the entire planning team. If the individual is being discharged from a hospital, and he or she is transitioning directly into a ResHap placement, the sending SC will ensure that the receiving provider is prepared to support the individual's medical needs by getting the hospital to participate in the discharge planning, getting any discharge documents that may be sent with the individual, as medication orders, training and instructions regarding any kind of care procedures, monitoring, etc. The sending SC will ensure that the sending and receiving regional office nurses are involved in that planning process, because the nurses would want to be aware of any medical support or any medical follow-up that they would need to be included on. The sending TCM agency and regional office are responsible for the individual support coordination for that first 30 days. After the move, the individual support coordination will be co-facilitated by the sending SC as the lead. Service monitoring will be done by the sending SC unless it's discussed on the transition call by both the sending and receiving TCM or regional office, that the receiving SC will complete that service monitoring. 90% of the time, the receiving SC is usually pretty good at doing that service monitoring, so they can get to know that individual, as they will most likely be the receiving SC of the case. For the first 30 days, the receiving agency provider will bill the sending regional office for any approved services until the date of transfer, and then event report forms will be sent by the provider to the receiving regional office. The SC will enter the information into CMOR. The receiving regional office will send a copy of the event report form to the sending SC. That event report form should be marked copy, and then the receiving TCM entity or regional office will input any authorizations or budgets into their CMOR so that the agency provider can bill for the services after the 30 days. A post-move meeting or call will be held between 15 to 30 days after the individual moves. This will be co-facilitated by the sending support coordinator and that CLC. The transfer date will be determined during the first meeting, and transfers will be completed within 30 days. I will repeat, transfers will be completed within 30 days. Outcomes and action steps shall be reviewed. If new ones are to be developed, then it is the sending support coordinator who will provide an up-to-date ISP amendment and to the receiving support coordinator upon transfer. And then this is important because this doesn't happen very often, but if additional service requests need to be completed after the post-move meeting, the transfer will still occur, but the new SC, the receiving SC, will complete those requests and for the new services that will go through the receiving UR. The sending support coordinator, supervisor, and TCM transfer contact will electronically forward a completed transfer form to the appropriate receiving TCM transfer contact, the sending and receiving regional office transfer contact designees. Prior to sending the records, the sending support coordinator, supervisor, or TCM transfer contact will verify that all items on the file audit checklist are contained in the file. And then after review of that transfer form, the receiving transfer contact designees or receiving TCM transfer contact will send an encrypted email to the sending TCM and transfer contact within, here we are again, the 3 business days, which will include the following information: confirmation that they received the transfer information, the date of effective transfer, and an address to mail the records. And then again, the episode of care will end for the sending regional office 1 day prior to the date of transfer.
So now we get to talk, now that we've walked through the natural home and DD res tab transition and transfers, let's take a look at how the file transfers from one region to the next.
Ooh, I'm excited.
Are you excited? So all files from the sending regional office and sending TCM entity, including certain historical, electronic, or hard copy, shall be sent to the receiving TCM entity within 5 business days of the electronic transfer date. If the sending regional office has a manila or skeletal file with information listed below, it shall be sent directly to the receiving regional office. If the receiving regional office does not receive a manila or skeletal file, the TCM agency shall forward the following list of original documents to the regional office. All legal documents, including guardianship letters, conservator letters, court orders, and other custody documents, marriage certificates, birth certificates, etc. And all admission documents, including eligibility determination and admissions information, assessment and reports used to determine eligibility, application information, client records receipts, client choice documents, diagnosis sheets, and supportive documentation. Any paper records being forwarded need to be hand-delivered or mailed by UPS, the United States Postal Service, certified with return receipt. Please refer to Division Directive 1.060 for storage, retention, and destruction information on records. Now, Titus, we're going to talk about transfers from the habilitation centers or state-operated programs.
Go for it.
So transfers from the HAB centers, there is a list, which when you get the copy of this PowerPoint, you'll be able to click on this right here. But it has a list of transition coordinators for the state. And these coordinators would be what we refer to in the next couple of slides as the transition coordinators.
Correct. So on this link, it says SC Transfer Contact Brochure. I understand that. But when you click on it, if you scroll down to the very bottom, it will have those habilitation centers that we have throughout the state. It will also have those transition coordinators who are responsible for the HAB center transfers.
So at least quarterly, the team for an individual residing in a state-operated program will review and assess supports that would be necessary for the individual to live in a less restrictive setting. If the team identifies that an individual could live successfully in the community, or the individual or legally responsible party or the person close to the individual advocates for a transition to the community, then process for transition from the HAB center will begin. It's a very similar process as the DD Res HAB transition process, Individuals will be put on the database, meet and greets will still happen, meet potential housemates, and view potential homes. The difference is that the transition coordinator will be that point person and not the service coordinator. Transitions from HAB centers are facilitated by a transition coordinator. The transition coordinator works with the individual, family, and responsible party to research the community living options available to the individuals in the community, identify the location where the individual prefers to live, submit the individual's referral information to the referral database, explore the supports available through the providers that respond to the individual's referral, and may include assisting the individual, family, and responsible party to visit those potential agencies. Again, planning for that transition. Once an agency has been chosen by the individual and the legally responsible party, the transition coordinator will notify the receiving regional office CLC that the individual will be transitioning to an agency in the receiving regional office's area. They will notify the receiving TCM entity and provider of the transition. They will ensure that the team gives careful consideration to potential housemates. Again, the housemate compatibility tool may be used in considering the compatibility of the housemates. Still notifying everyone, just like you would with the HAB team, with the Res HAB transition.
Communication.
The transition coordinator also will schedule and facilitate a transition meeting, including all individuals necessary to plan the supports that will need to be in place for an individual to successfully transition to the community, and more than one meeting may be needed. Using the initial transition meeting discussion guide to plan the steps for a successful transition, using the risk assessment guide or a similar tool to ensure that risk mitigation is part of that transition planning, and then developing that transition plan. The transition coordinator will schedule times for the staff at the new provider agency to visit and shadow the individuals at the HAB center, for the individual to visit the new home and meet potential housemates, and for that individual to maybe spend the night with a potential housemate.
Absolutely.
Staff at the HAB center will then assist with planning visits to that new home and preparing the individual for those visits, and then provide training to that new provider staff on the individual's behavior support plan if it's applicable. Transfers from the HAB center, again, planning for transition. The transition coordinator schedules and facilitates a final transition meeting, which the team will confirm that all supports needed by the individual, including employment, referrals, doctor's appointments, adaptive equipment needs, etc., are all in place. That there's a tentative move date set, and then post-move review dates are set up for that 30, 60, and 90-day increments following the move. The transition coordinator will then submit that transition plan, budget information, and all necessary paperwork, ICF-DD level of care, service authorization documents, Medicaid waiver provider information, service choice statements. All of that will be submitted to the regional office, the sending regional office, URC, for approval. They will complete a health inventory and confirm the final move date once URC and the regional director have approved the transition plan and budget.
Stop! Hold on! Wait a second.
So there's a difference here. The difference is that once the individual moves, the receiving regional office or TCM entity is responsible for the case. This is very different than the DD Res HAB transition. So the sending regional office will request a waiver slot for that individual, transfer the individual to the receiving regional office effective the date of the move. Then the receiving regional office TCM will be responsible for support coordination the day the individual moves, except transfer the day the individual moves. So that's different, isn't it?
That's way different because there's no, 30-day final transition meeting. It's just the day that individual moves is the day that the receiving regional office or TCM takes support coordination of that person.
Gotcha. So let's talk a little bit about transfers from the day of the move. The current medication administration record, the current medications and or medication lab results, current annual physicals, current ISPs, current BSP, and any information regarding upcoming doctor's appointments, dental appointments, whatever, will go with that individual to the home. A complete inventory checklist accompanies that individual to the new home, which is very important. And the individual's file is transferred from the sending habilitation center to the receiving regional office. If an individual will receive support coordination from a TCM entity other than a regional office, then that receiving regional office will transfer the file to the TCM entity within 5 days of the move. So this slide shows you the difference between what the transition coordinator will do and what the support coordinator will do after the move. So post-move follow-up, the transition coordinator will facilitate those 30, 60, and 90 post-move review meetings where any additional support needs and adjustment concerns will be discussed and the frequency of the home visits will be determined. They will complete that post-habilitation center transition review form and send it to all the team members, and schedule additional monthly follow-up meetings if there's any concerns or issues at the 90-day meeting. Then, after the move, the service coordinator will make weekly visits, weekly to the individual for the first 30 days.
Okay.
Then they will monitor purchases for the individual through the consumer or the community transition service and discuss any additional items and or changes in items needed with the transition team. They approve that post-habilitation center transition review form by signing the form or documenting approval via encrypted email to the transition coordinator. They will complete an addendum to the ISP, which includes objectives for implementation in the community. But the date of the annual ISP does not change. It remains the same. If the individual has a behavior support plan, the individual will have behavioral services ongoing in the community and will be referred to the Regional Behavioral Support Review Committee. The Behavioral Resource Team will assist the service coordinator and support provider to utilize positive, proactive, and preventative strategies that have the best chances of supporting the individual with a good quality of life. They will provide at least weekly on-site visits and consultation for the first month and at least bi-weekly on-site visits and consultation for the next 60 days to assist with consistent utilization and adjustment of strategies of supports recommended by the transition team. The daily rate for individuals who transition from the HAB Center is determined utilizing the individual's current rate allocation score. Providers can be reimbursed for administrative costs necessary to the process to transition someone from the HAB Center, such as staff training, nurse consultation, locating housing, and then costs associated with the visits, etc. When residential services are developed, planned, and implemented, the usual administrative fee for the first month may be increased by an amount not to exceed $1,500 to reflect provider administrative costs required to develop new services. This increase is added as a line item to the ISL budget or written as a separate item on the shared living budget for the first month of service. Future ISL and shared living budgets must reflect the provider's usual administrative fee within the ISL and shared living guidelines. The combined cost for residential and reimbursement for increased administrative costs is not to exceed the cap for the daily rate of ISL or shared living arrangements for that initial month. If an individual is moving to a group home, where there's existing vacancy, an existing ISL or shared living home, transition administrative costs may be negotiated up to an amount but not to exceed $500 for that person. If a transition administrative costs are approved for a group home service provider, they will be reimbursed under the RES-HAB transition code of T2016TG for the first month of service only. These administrative transition expenses will only be reimbursed to a provider after the person moves into the residential setting as an active waiver participant. Actual provider administrative expenses must be documented in detail and submitted to the regional office during the first month of service. Documentation must include dates of service, specific administrative activities, actual cost of each activity, names of staff members, total cost, etc. And this accounting sheet must be signed and dated by the provider. Now guess what, Titus?
What's going on?
It's time for story time with Titus.
Oh, my favorite part. So story time with Titus. So when we were developing this webinar, I asked my fellow CLCs if they would provide me with some stories about how communication with transitions either from a habilitation center or just transitions from ISL to ISL or whatever. So I've got a couple of really good stories that I'm eager to share with you. So there was a gentleman who transitioned from Bell Fountain Hab Center to an ISL in the community. He was doing well except for the fact that each morning after breakfast, he would go outside, walk over to the neighbor's house, go inside, and sit down at their kitchen table. And nobody could figure out why he was doing this. So the transition team got back together and finally figured out that when he was at Bell Fountain, his routine was to eat his breakfast and then walk to the building next door where his day program was located. He was just doing the same thing that he had been doing for the last 20 years. You cannot possibly plan for anything like this. They wouldn't have had known ahead of time that this was going to happen. But by going back to the transition team to figure out what was happening was the key. So again, as we've been harping the entire time, communication is vital. Another story that we have is after being supported by the same agency for some time, there was an individual that decided that he wanted to change service providers. The individual's profile was put on the consumer referral database. They spent time meeting agencies, touring new homes, and meeting potential housemates. After careful consideration, the individual and their team selected a new provider, and the team began the process of transitioning the individual to the new agency, which included holding the planning meeting. The previous agency participated in the individual's transition meeting and cooperated fully in any way that they could. The new agency submitted the revenue-neutral budget, which was approved by the Utilization Review Committee, and all ongoing services were approved. The day came when the individual was to move out of his former home and into his new home. When the individual got all moved in and settled, he was a little hot and he decided that he wanted to take a shower. Well, the individual was immediately faced with a challenge in the bathroom because he could not lift his leg up and over the tub into the shower. You see, at his former house, the bathroom that he utilized had a walk-in shower. Although there were two successful transitions between the agencies, the move went well, all the services were approved, the team neglected to assess the individual's skills and capabilities. The support coordinator did not realize that the individual needed a walk-in shower. They just assumed that he was using it because it was convenient and accessible, as it was the only bathroom in the home. Long story short is that it took another 9 to 12 weeks for a home modification to be requested, approved, and completed. So during that time, the individual utilized more staff so that he could safely transfer in and out of the shower each time he wanted to shower or bathe. So this just goes to show that communication is important, and you should leave no stone unturned when you're participating in these transition meetings, because there are little things that nobody knows. So if you communicate as much as you can, the more effective the transition will be.
So that's a nice segue into modifications. Home accessibility modifications. Waiver environmental accessibility adaptations and home modification services up to $7,500, as well as specialized medical equipment and supplies up to $7,500, may be accessed in advance of a person moving into the community. Only adaptations as per the service definition are covered when specific need is documented within the transition plan. And of course, that has to go through UR.
Of course.
Home accessibility modifications may be authorized in the waiver up to 180 consecutive days in advance of the individual's transition from Title 19 funded facilities, such as an ICF ID or an SNS skilled nursing facility.
Right.
The home modification started while the person is living in the facility is not considered complete and may not be billed until the date that the individual leaves the facility and enters the waiver. The claim for reimbursement must indicate the date the individual leaves the institution and enrolls in the waiver as the date of service for allowable expenses incurred during the previous 180 days.
So now I'm going to speak on money follows the person. And in our morning session, I made the distinction that I received a lot of emails and phone calls from support coordinators about getting individuals enrolled in Money Follows the Person, as they thought Money Follows the Person was the individuals actually receive the money to help move into their home and to get the funds set up, which is the Community Transition Services, which we will talk about at a later time. But for Money Follows the Person, this is a grant that supports efforts to provide Medicaid-eligible people with choice of where they want to live and where they want to receive services. Qualified people living in nursing facilities or HAB centers that are moving to the community. It also promotes a system that is person-centered, based on needs, and ensures high-quality services in the community. So this is the next one. Can you get over there? There we go. So the eligibility criteria, the individual has to have lived in a state habilitation center or nursing facility for a period of 90 days or more, currently receiving both health net benefits in the care facility prior to the transition, and transition to a home that is leased or owned by the participant or the participant's family, or move into a residential housing with no more than 4 individuals living in the home. So what Money Follows the Person, it's state funds and federal dollars as well. Currently, 60% of the funding is federal dollars, whereas 40% is state dollars. But when an individual participates in Money Follows the Person, that becomes an 80-20 split, 80% being paid by the federal government and 20 being paid by the state, which obviously saves the state 20%. So it is a 365-day program. So even if an individual goes into the hospital for 2 weeks, that 2 weeks will be tacked on to the end of the 365 days, so they do receive a full year. Now, I don't know if that includes a leap year. I'm guessing it would if it was 366 days, but that's something that I can find out. But contact your community living coordinator if you know or if you believe that someone would participate or would be eligible for Money Follows the Person. This slide is what the support coordinator does as compared to what the community living coordinator does. So we'll start with the support coordinator first. They inform the CLC of the proposed move and provides information to the CLC that would determine if a person qualifies for Money Follows the Person. The support coordinator then writes the transition plan, also known as the ISP amendment, and submits that to the Utilization Review Committee to obtain pre-approval for the services the person will need to make the move. UR pre-approval must be obtained in order to access Money Follows the Person. The community living coordinator then will determine if the person qualifies for Money Follows the Person. The community living coordinator also provides a copy of the participation agreement to the support coordinator. For nursing home transitions, the support coordinator will be most involved in the initial planning stages and development of the transition plan. When it is identified that someone wants to move from a nursing home or community ICF ID, the support coordinator needs to communicate with the CLC throughout the planning process. So this slide, the support coordinator talks with the legally responsible person about Money Follows the Person. That legally responsible person must sign the Money Follows the Person participation agreement in order for the individual to be able to participate in Money Follows the Person. Without that signed participation agreement, the CLC cannot conduct the Money Follows the Person level of care assessment and apply for Money Follows the Person for the individual. Excuse me. The agreement can be scanned and faxed as the original is not needed. So once the information is obtained, the community living coordinator obtains all necessary information from the nursing home and any other source necessary for the money follows the person level of care and application process. The community living coordinator will complete the electronic application via the money follows the person web-based system. They provide that participation agreement to the money follows the person staff, and then they send an email to the money follows the person staff informing them when the move is to occur, and the money follows the person staff then schedules that quality of life survey for the individual. This statement has to be included in the ISP or the amendment, as it is a federal requirement. It lets UR know that the individual is participating in Money Follows the Person. This can be found in the transition manual. It is located on page 27. This is what the participation agreement looks like. If you feel that your individual would qualify for Money Follows the Person, just let your CLC know. They can email this out to you, and then you would get this to the individual or the legally responsible person for their signature. So if the individual is transitioning from a nursing home or a skilled nursing facility, the support coordinator will take the lead to plan that transition and enroll the individual in Money Follows the Person. However, if the individual is transitioning from the HAB center, it's on the transition coordinator to enroll and refer the individual to Money Follows the Person. So this is different. This is a different process than that of the previous slides. The day that the move occurs, the support coordinator will inform the CLC that the individual has moved. If paid DD residential services are involved, the SC informs the receiving provider that the provider must report to the SC anytime the individual leaves the DD residential services for a temporary stay at the hospital, nursing home, rehab, crisis unit, etc. Again, that way the community living coordinator can enter that information into the Money Follows the Person system so that it is a continuous 365 days. Once the community living coordinator enters the move date into the web-based system, this is the final action, and that is what starts Money Follows the Person. The support coordinator provides follow-up information required by CMS to the CLC. The support coordinator, that's done through the monthly report that the SC completes, and the CLC sends that to the support coordinator on a monthly basis. The community living coordinator pulls that data information that's available to them from the Money Follows the Person data system. They gather the monthly reports from the CLC and collect that information, and they also submit required follow-up information into the Money Follows the Person web-based system. We only ask the SC to provide information that cannot be tracked through the data system.
And that's important to keep that federal money flowing, right, Travis?
Yes, anytime we can save the state money, we are all about it.
Okay, now we're going to talk about a different demographic of the sexual offender status, and individuals on that sexual offender status. Notification procedures for individuals on the sexual offender status. Communication between the service coordinator and the CLC is key to ensuring all forensic notification procedures are followed. The service coordinator should contact the CLC anytime an individual is seeking a residential setting who is required to register on the Highway Patrol Sex Offender Registry, is required to register on the Juvenile Sex Offender Registry in the county where he or she resides, or has been determined permanently incompetent to stand trial for a sexual offense. Missouri State Statute 630.127 requires the following notification procedures. When an individual who is a registered sex offender will be living in a setting with other individuals who receive DMH-funded placement, those individuals who the registered offender will reside must be notified of the registered offender status. When an individual who has been found permanently incompetent to proceed to trial on an offense which would have required registration as a sex offender if he or she had been found guilty will be living in a setting with other individuals who receive DMH-funded placement, DMH is required to contact the individual's legally responsible party to request permission to notify individuals with whom the individual will live of the charges for which the individual was found incompetent to proceed.
It's a mouthful.
It sure is. Then, Missouri Statute 630127 requires the following notification procedures. The notification procedure also applies if an individual who currently receives residential placement becomes required to register as found permanently incompetent to proceed on a charge covered by statute. If the individual is referred for residential placement, the sending CLC will determine if the individual is either on the Highway Patrol Sex Offender Registry or the Juvenile Sex Offender Registry in their county of residence, as appropriate, before placing the individual's referral information on the Consumer Referral Database. If the individual seeking residential placement is a juvenile, the service coordinator will assist the CLC in getting a signed consent form from the juvenile's parent, legally responsible party for the CLC to send the juvenile office for the purpose of determining if the juvenile is on the Juvenile Sex Offender Registry. If the individual, adult or juvenile, is required to register on the Highway Patrol Sex Offender Registry, the sending CLC will send notification letters to the other housemates who receive DMH-funded placement or their legally responsible party before the individual moves into the home. If the individual has been found incompetent to proceed to trial on an offense for which he or she has been required to register, had he or she been found guilty, the sending CLC will seek permission from the individual or the legally responsible party to disclose information about the offense to the potential housemates before the individual moves into the home. Refusal to grant consent will not automatically stop the placement, but will require additional discussion by the individual's planning team. If a juvenile is required to register on the Sex Offender Registry in their county of residence, consent to disclose information regarding the juvenile's legal status to other individuals receiving DMH-funded placement with whom the juvenile will live will be requested from the parent or legally responsible party, and if parental consent is obtained, the sending CLC will send appropriate notification letters, and then again, refusal to grant consent will not automatically stop the placement, but may require additional discussion by the individual's planning team. Specific procedures for planning appropriate residential supports for juveniles who are registered offenders are also covered under the Department Operating Regulation 4.270. The CLC can provide technical assistance to an individual support planning team regarding housing and planning specialized supports for registered offenders and other individuals who display aberrant sexual behaviors.
So we're going to transition now to talk about money, everybody's favorite topic. So transition services are a one-time setup expenses for individuals who transition from an institution, an ICF ID, or a Title 19 nursing facility or other congregate living setting to a less restrictive community-based living arrangement such as a home or apartment. These community-based living arrangements are not provider-owned or controlled. However, they include homes where waiver participants own or rent with or without housemates and or receive ISL services. So an individual is eligible for up to $3,000. If the individual does not exhaust all of those funds the first time and has a qualifying move later on in life, he or she can still be eligible for those remaining funds. So Jennifer, if you qualified for community transition services and you moved and your community transition services were only $1,300, and then later on in life you wanted to move somewhere else, you still have those $1,700 that you can utilize at that later time. Once the service is authorized, the provider has 30 days prior to and 30 days after the move to exhaust the amount that was authorized. So congregate living settings include any provider-owned residential setting where no health net reimbursement is available. So an example would be an intermediate care facility for individuals with intellectual disabilities, nursing facilities, residential care facilities, assisted living, heating group homes, etc. The services available are in the following waivers: comprehensive, community support, and partnership for hope. And then the waiver code there at the bottom, T2038. Examples of expenses that may be covered. So if you're needing to transport furnishings or personal possessions to your new living arrangement, any furnishing expenses required to occupy and use a community domicile. So any security deposits that are required to obtain a lease on an apartment or home that does not constitute paying that rent. So utility setup fees, deposits for phone, water, electricity, heating, trash removal, etc. And then safety assurances such as pest eradication, allergen control, or a one-time cleaning prior to the occupancy. So examples of expenses that may be covered also include furnishings for the individual to establish his or her basic living arrangement, a bed, table, chairs, window blinds, eating utensils, the food preparation items. So community transition services do not cover monthly rental or mortgage expenses, any kind of food, regular utility charges, and or household appliances that are used purely derivative or recreational, such as a TV, cable access, VCRs, I don't know who has those, DVDs, Blu-ray players, and total transition services, again, are limited to $3,000 per individual. You can refer to the Community Transition Service tip sheet, which is in the transition manual located on page 24. And just as a note to all of the SCs, please make sure you are justifying the need for the service. In summary, please notify your local community living coordinator whenever you have an individual who you feel is eligible for money follows the person, could use the transition services, are moving and they require a new TCM entity or a new regional office, if they're seeking rehab for the first time, or they need a new provider, if they're on the sex offender registry, if they're in need of a home modification, or if they're having difficulty adjusting to a new transition or move from the HAP center. The transition manual is your best friend, and it can be found at the following website address. You would just click on Community Transition Manual. And then there is a frequently asked questions document in the transition manual, or you can always contact your local CLC for further assistance. And our final thoughts, again, we've stressed this so much, is that communication is vital when it comes to transitions and transfers. Make sure you're talking to the entire transition team, which includes but not limited to the sending and receiving support coordinators, their supervisors, the community living coordinators, the TCM and regional office transfer contacts, any provider staff, the QERNs, the behavior analysts, etc.
Because no two transitions are the same.
Because no two transitions are the same, exactly what Jennifer said in the very beginning of this webinar. So who are you going to call?
Ghostbusters!
They're probably not going to answer, but your local community living coordinator most likely will answer if they're in their office. So if you click on this link, it will take you to your local community living coordinators, who they are, their phone numbers, and email addresses, etc. So if you do have questions, we are going to put together a TA document. So if you have questions on Monday or Tuesday, because we know you're going to think about this webinar over the weekend, so please submit those emails to ddmail@dmh.mo.gov. We will compile those questions. We will complete a TA document, and then Heike, will we post that to the website, or where will that go?
It'll be posted to the website, and a link to that document will be included in the email blast that summarizes everything from this presentation today. And it's anticipated that will go out by the end of next week. So you will be able to get all the information, all the links, in one spot through that email blast to the documents and everything that are posted on our website.
Cool. So thank you everyone for listening to Jennifer and I ramble about the transition process. We hope we made it fun for you, and have a great weekend.
Bye, everyone.